Satanism is a group of ideological and philosophical beliefs based on the character of Satan. Contemporary religious practice of Satanism began with the founding of the Church of Satan in 1966, although a few historical precedents exist. Prior to the public practice, Satanism existed primarily as an accusation by various Christian groups toward perceived ideological opponents, rather than a self-identity. Satanism, and the concept of Satan, has also been used by artists and entertainers for symbolic expression. Satanist groups that appeared after the 1960s are widely diverse, but two major trends are theistic Satanism and atheistic Satanism. Theistic Satanists venerate Satan as a supernatural deity, viewing him not as omnipotent but rather as a patriarch. In contrast, atheistic Satanists regard Satan as merely a symbol of certain human traits. Contemporary religious Satanism is predominantly an American phenomenon, the idea spreading elsewhere with the effects of globalization and the Internet. The Internet spreads awareness of other Satanists, and is also the main battleground for Satanist disputes. Satanism started to reach Eastern Europe in the 1990s, in time with the fall of the Soviet Union, and most noticeably in Poland and Lithuania, predominantly Roman Catholic countries. It was estimated that there were 50,000 Satanists in 1990. There may now be as many as 100,000 Satanists in the world. Definition. In the study of Satanism, the religious studies scholars Asbjørn Durendal, James R. Lewis, and Jesper A. Peterson stated that the term Satanism has a history of being a designation made by people against those whom they dislike. It is a term used for othering. Elsewhere, Peterson noted that Satanism as something others do is very different from Satanism as a self-designation. Eugene Gallagher noted that, as commonly used, Satanism was usually a polemical, not a descriptive term. Accusations of Satanism. Historically, some people or groups have been specifically described as worshipping Satan, of the devil, or of being devoted to the work of Satan. The widespread preponderance of these groups in European cultures is in part connected with the importance and meaning of Satan within Christianity. Pagan celebrating Pan, Odin, Hercules, or other pagan deities were often claimed by the Catholic Church to be worshipping the devil and his crones and minions. Examples of this can be found in the medieval canon Episcopi, for example, where witches are described as serving Satan along with the goddess Diana, at least from the onset of the Renaissance. However, the Catholic Church came to regard ancient Rome, including the lessons from pagan Roman mythology, in a more positive light. Many Gnostic groups have been regarded as satanic, with its prominent details implying Lucifer, or the serpent, as being a true god, a prophet that liberated Adam and Eve, while the God of the Old Testament is regarded as a demiurge. Herminius accused Mani, founder of Manichaeanism, of being satanic when Mani said that Jehovah is the devil god which created the world, and that he who spoke with Moses, the Jews, and the priests, is the of darkness, not the God of truth. The witch trials in early modern Europe, in particular, the notion that witches congregated at a witch's Sabbath in order to serve the devil. Gilles de Rais was a French nobleman who was tried and executed for the murders of hundreds of children in quasi-satanic rituals. Johann Georg Faust. Many instructions, in German and in Latin, for making a pact with the devil were attributed to him. These were collected and published in Germany in a few of the volumes of Das Kloster. Urbane Grandeur. although set up by the Catholic Church. A very famous document, in Latin, of a pact with the devil he allegedly wrote has been preserved. People involved in the poison affair, such as Catherine de Chaise and Etienne Guiberg. The documentation from the trial is the principal early modern source for information on the Black Mass. The Marquis de Sade, described by Adrian Blak as being a fanatic Satanist. His works graphically described blasphemy against the Catholic Church, such as an orgy resembling a Black Mass conducted by Pope Pius VI in the Vatican. In 1865, the anti-Vatican Italian poet Giosuè Carducci published his poem In O Satana, praising Satan as the god of reason and expressing religious hatred towards Christianity. Many adherents of the decadent movement, such as the Polish author Stanislaw Przybyszewski, the Belgian artist Félicien Rops, and the French poet Charles Baudelaire, either called themselves Satanists, or created overtly Satanist artwork and literature. Some French movements widely described as being Satanist by French writers of the time. The most well-known description available in English is the 1891 novel Le Bar by Joris Karl Huysmans. However, there were numerous other well-known personalities in France that were related to the circles Huysmans describes, such as Joseph-Antoine Boulan, Stanislas de Guitare, Henri-Antoine Jules Bois, and Joseph and Péladan, who either wrote about Satanism in France, or were accused of being Satanists themselves. Freemasonry was described as being Satanist in the completely discredited Taxil hoax. Palladists are a Satanist society, a member of that society. Its actual existence is a matter of dispute. In Germany, from about 1910 to 1925, Hans-Heinz Ewers, who was becoming a popular German horror writer, was giving lectures on Die Religion des Satan, inspired by Stanislaw Przybyszewski's 1897 German work Die Synagoge des Satan. In 1926, Eugen Grocher founded the Fraternitas Satanae, which dealt with both Lucifer and Satan, and published the book Satanische Magie the same year. At least two satanic sects existed in France in the 1930s. One was led by Maria de Naglovska and had rituals dedicated to Satan and Lucifer. Another, led by a former Catholic priest, celebrated an inversion of the Latin Mass, which included the phrase In nomine Domini Dei nostri Satani Luciferi excelsi. Islam. The Yazidis, a minority religion of the Middle East who worship Melek Taus, are often referred to as Satan worshippers by some Muslims. Due to this, they have been targeted for conversion and extermination by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Artistic Satanism, literary Satanism, European Enlightenment. Some works, such as Paradise Lost, were taken up by romantics like Byron and described as presenting the biblical figure of Satan as an allegory representing a crisis of faith, individualism, free will, wisdom and enlightenment. Those works actually featuring Satan as a heroic character are fewer in number but do exist. George Bernard Shaw and Mark Twain included such characterizations in the works long before religious Satanists took up the pen. From then on, Satan and Satanism started to gain a new meaning outside of Christianity. In music, black metal has often been connected with Satanism, in part for the lyrical content of several bands and the frequent use of imagery often tied to left-hand path beliefs. More often than not, musicians associating themselves with black metal say they do not believe in legitimate satanic ideology and often profess to being atheists, agnostics, or religious skeptics. In some instances, followers of right-hand path religions use satanic references for entertainment purposes and shock value. Most of black metal's first-wave bands only used Satanism for shock value. One of the few exceptions is Merciful Fate's singer King Diamond, who follows Lavian Satanism and whom Michael Monaghan calls one of the only performers of the 80s satanic metal who was more than just a poser, using a devilish image for shock value. One early precursor to satanic metal was the 1969 rock album Witchcraft Destroys Minds and Amp Reaps Souls, which contained numerous references to Satanism that reappeared in later satanic rock music. Glenn Benton, vocalist and bassist of the band Deicide, once openly claimed to be a practitioner of theistic Satanism, and has spoken publicly to profess staunch anti-Christian sentiment. The controversial Dissection frontman John Nodded openly spoke about his Chaos Gnostic satanic beliefs, being a member of the misanthropic Luciferian order, and called his band the Sonic Propaganda Unit of the MLO. Norwegian black metal artists such as Euronymous from Mayhem and Infernus from Gorgoroth have also identified themselves as Satanists and actively promoted the beliefs. Numerous church burnings that covered parts of Norway in the early 1990s were also attributed to youths involved in the black metal movement, which included people promoting theistic satanic beliefs and strong anti-Lavian attitudes. However, the legitimacy of such actions as satanic endeavors, rather than simply rebellious actions done for publicity, is something that has been doubted by even some of those who contribute to the genre. Religious Satanism. Rather than being one single form of religious Satanism, there are instead multiple different religious Satanisms, each with different ideas about what being a Satanist entails. Durrell, Lewis, and Peterson believed that it was not a single movement, but rather a milieu. They believed that there was a family resemblance that united all of the varying groups in this milieu, and that most of them were self-religions. They argued that there were a set of features that were common to the groups in this satanic milieu. These were the positive use of the term Satanist as a designation, an emphasis on individualism, a genealogy that connects them to other satanic groups, a transgressive and antinomian stance, a self-perception as an elite, and an embrace of values such as pride, self-reliance, and productive non-conformity. Durrell, Lewis, and Peterson argued that the groups within the satanic milieu could be divided into three groups: reactive Satanists, rationalist Satanists, and esoteric Satanists. They saw reactive Satanism as encompassing popular Satanism, inverted Christianity, and symbolic rebellion, and noted that it situates itself in opposition to society while at the same time conforming to society's perspective of evil. Rationalist Satanism is used to describe the trend in the satanic milieu, which is atheistic, skeptical, materialistic, and Epicurean. Esoteric Satanism instead applied to those forms which are theistic and draw upon ideas from other forms of Western esotericism, modern paganism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. Lavian Satanism was founded in 1966 by Anton LaVey through the establishment of the Church of Satan. Its central text, the Satanic Bible, was published in 1969. The fundamentals of the religion's creed are synthesized in the 9 satanic statements, the 9 satanic sins, and the 11 satanic rules of the earth. Contrary to popular belief, Lavian Satanism does not involve the worship of deities. It is an atheistic philosophy that asserts the individual as their own god. Adherents instead see the character of Satan as an archetype of pride, carnality, and enlightenment. Adherents to the philosophy have described Satanism as a non-spiritual religion of the flesh, or the world's first carnal religion. The Church of Satan. The Church of Satan was established at the Black House in San Francisco, California, on Walpurgis Nacht, April 30, 1966, by Anton Czandor Lavie, who was the church's high priest until his death in 1997. In 2001, Peter H. Gilmore was appointed to the position of high priest, and the church's headquarters were moved to Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, New York City. The church is dedicated to the religion of Lavie and Satanism as codified in the Satanic Bible. The church rejects the legitimacy of any other organizations who claim to be Satanists. First Satanic Church. After Lavie's death in 1997, the Church of Satan was taken over by a new administration and its headquarters was moved to New York. Lavie's daughter, the High Priestess Carla Lavie, felt this to be a disservice to her father's legacy. The first Satanic Church was refounded on October 31, 1999 by Carla Lavie to carry on the legacy of her father. She continues to run it out of San Francisco, California. The Satanic Temple. The Satanic Temple is an American religious and political activist organization based in New York. The organization actively participates in public affairs that have manifested in several public political actions and efforts at lobbying, with a focus on the separation of church and state and using satire against Christian groups that it believes interfere with personal freedom. The Satanic Temple does not believe in a supernatural Satan, as they believe that this encourages superstition that will keep them from being malleable to the best current scientific understandings of the material world. The temple uses the literary Satan as metaphor to construct a cultural narrative which promotes pragmatic skepticism, rational reciprocity, personal autonomy, and curiosity. Satan is thus used as a symbol representing the eternal rebel against arbitrary authority and social norms. Theistic Satanism. Theistic Satanism is a form of Satanism with the primary belief that Satan is an actual deity, a force to revere or worship. Other characteristics of theistic Satanism may include a belief in magic, which is manipulated through ritual, although that is not a defining criterion, and theistic Satanists may focus solely on devotion. Third term of the Trinity. Satanic rhetoric and elements featured in the third term of the Trinity, an esoteric group founded in Paris, France in 1935 by the Russian occultist Maria de Naglovska. Our Lady of Endor Coven. Our Lady of Endor Coven, also known as Ophite Cultus Satanis, was a satanic cult founded in 1948 by Herbert Arthur Sloan in Toledo, Ohio. The group was heavily influenced by Gnosticism and worshipped Satanus, the name for Satan. Satanus was defined in Gnostic terms as the serpent in the Garden of Eden who revealed the knowledge of the true God to Eve. That it called itself Ophite is a reference to the ancient Gnostic sect of the Ophites, who were said to worship the serpent. Order of Nine Angles. The authors Pafaxneld and Jesper Peterson write that the Order of Nine Angles represent a dangerous and extreme form of Satanism. The honor first attracted public attention during the 1980s and 1990s after being mentioned in books detailing fascist Satanism. They were initially formed in the United Kingdom and are presently organized around clandestine cells and around what it calls sinister tribes. Luciferianism. Luciferianism can be understood best as a belief system or intellectual creed that venerates the essential and inherent characteristics that are fixed and commonly given to Lucifer. Luciferianism is often identified as an auxiliary creed, a movement of Satanism, due to the common identification of Lucifer with Satan. Some Luciferians accept this identification and/or consider Lucifer as the light-bearer and illuminated aspect of Satan, giving them the name of Satanists and the right to bear the title. Others reject it, giving the argument that Lucifer is a more positive and easygoing ideal than Satan. They are inspired by the ancient myths of Egypt, Rome and Greece, Gnosticism and traditional Western occultism. Temple of Set. The Temple of Set is an initiatory occult society claiming to be the world's leading left-hand path religious organization. It was established in 1975 by Michael A. Aquino and certain members of the priesthood of the Church of Satan, who left because of administrative and philosophical disagreements. TOS deliberately self-differentiates from Cobalt to self-id in several ways, most significantly in theology and sociology. The philosophy of the Temple of Set may be summed up as enlightened individualism, enhancement and improvement of oneself by personal education, experiment and initiation. This process is necessarily different and distinctive for each individual. The members do not agree on whether Set is real or not, and are not expected to. Satanism, in theory, is similar to theistic Satanism. The principal deity of Satanism is the ancient Egyptian god Set, or Seth, the god of adversary. Set supposedly is the Dark Lord behind the Hebrew entity Satan. Set, as the first principle of consciousness, is emulated by Setians, who symbolize the concept of individual, subjective intelligence distinct from the natural order as the black flame. Controversies. Approval by Royal Navy. In 2004 it was claimed that Satanism was allowed in the Royal Navy of the British Armed Forces, despite opposition from Christians. In 2016, under a Freedom of Information request, the Navy Command Headquarters stated that, "We do not recognize Satanism as a formal religion, and will not grant facilities or make specific time available for individual worship." Supreme Court ruling. In 2005, the Supreme Court of the United States debated over protecting the religious rights of prison inmates after a lawsuit challenging the issue was filed to them.